Hey guys, so last year we spent a lot of time talking about punctuation. And so today and tomorrow we're just going to do a big, huge review of a bunch of different punctuation rules that we learned. Okay, so as we go through this, I just want you filling in the blanks. And again, this is all stuff we've talked about before, so this is just going to be kind of a quick review. So I'm going to go pretty fast, but we'll do practice in class and work on anything that we're confused about or don't remember super well. Okay? All right, so again, make sure you're filling in blanks as we go. All right, so we're going to talk mostly about quotation marks today because there's a bunch of like weird tiny little rules with quotation marks, and we want to make sure that we have all that stuff straight in our head. So direct quotations just means you're quoting someone else's direct or exact words, okay? So this one's pretty basic. You always want to use quotation marks to enclose a person's exact words. That one we should know. Okay, so for example, Pam said the meeting starts at 4. This is Pam's direct quote, so I'm going to put quotation marks around it. All right, now, more basics. Capitalization. You want to capitalize the first word of the quote when you're quoting a complete sentence. If you're just quoting like 2 or 3 words, you probably don't need to capitalize the first letter of it. But if you're quoting a complete sentence, you want to capitalize that. All right, so example, Mr. Johnson, who was working in his field that morning, said, "The alien spaceship appeared right before my own 2 eyes." So I'm quoting Mr. Johnson's complete sentence, so I'm going to capitalize the. All right, now, do not capitalize the first letter of the quote if you are only using a few words. All right, so although Mr. Johnson has seen odd things happening on the farm, he stated that this spaceship certainly takes the cake when it comes to unexplainable activity. So I just pulled one phrase from Mr. Johnson, and it kind of just flows right in my sentence, so I don't need to capitalize certainty. All right, if you broke up the quote in the middle of a sentence, don't capitalize the second part of the quote. So I didn't see an actual alien being, Mr. Johnson said, but I sure wish I had. So I have this whole sentence from Mr. Johnson, right? Here's the first part of the sentence, here's the second part of the sentence, and I'm breaking it up in the middle, okay? So I put, I don't need to capitalize the second part of it, okay? I don't need to capitalize that second half of the sentence. It's not a complete sentence. All right, when we do break up a quote like that, we want to set up our quote with commas. So for example, the storm, comma, David said, comma, is finally subsiding. So when you interrupt a quote, you need to put a quotation, or you need to put a comma inside the first set of quotation marks and before the second set of quotation marks. All right, now always put the punctuation mark inside the final quotation mark. And there's a couple exceptions to that, but let's look at the example first and we'll get into those. So I didn't see an actual alien being, comma, quotation mark, Mr. Johnson said, comma, but I sure wish I had, period, quotation mark. So notice how that comma and period are inside the quotation marks. You want to do that with 90% of your punctuation, okay? The only exceptions are if you're asking a question and your whole sentence is a question, but the quote itself is not a question, then you would want to put the question mark outside of the quotes, okay? So if I say something like, did Joni ask when is lunch? Well, that was a bad example because both of those things are questions. But if I said, did Joni say hello? All right, I would want to put my question mark outside the quotation marks because my whole sentence is a question, just that quote isn't, okay? All right, now, poetry. So when we quote poetry, you want to quote exactly. You want to maintain the line breaks of the original text, and I'll show you how to do that. So when quoting multiple lines of poetry, put a slash between lines. So this example from Langston Hughes, for if dreams die, slash, life is a barren field. Okay, so you want to show where the original line breaks are. We talked about this a lot last year. Line breaks are very important. So you put slashes. All right, so when quoting from a poem, you must, all right, introduce the quotes. And really this is any quote. You must introduce your quote. This isn't just poetry, this is any quote. All right, these quotes cannot stand alone. Quotes don't stand by themselves as a sentence. So for example, in Langston Hughes' poem Dreams, he uses the metaphor, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly, to emphasize the pain of losing one's dreams. So notice we introduced who said this, where is this quote from, what is it, it's a metaphor, what is it doing? Okay, so I have all this stuff that's explaining the quote. You can't just stick a quote by itself without any kind of introduction or explanation. Okay? Now, if you have very long quotations, so quotations that are more than 4 lines of prose or 3 lines of verse, place quotations in a freestanding block of text and do not use quotation marks. And I'll show you some examples. So you start the quotation on a brand new line with the entire quote indented a half an inch from the margin. Okay? If your paper is double-spaced, you want to make the block text double-spaced too. And you only indent the first line of the quotation by an additional 1/4 inch if you're citing multiple paragraphs. So if you're citing a whole bunch of paragraphs, which I don't think we'll often do, you still indent your paragraphs, and then the whole thing is indented. All right, so here's an example. Nellie Dean treats Heathcliff poorly and dehumanizes him throughout her narration. So that's my introduction. Remember, quotes can't stand alone. Then I put my colon. All right, and then I have this super long quote, okay, that I put off by itself, no quotation marks, indented. Here's an example from poetry. In Langston Hughes' poem's Dream, he states, again, I introduce it, no quote can stand alone. I put my colon, put my block quote. Okay? All right, quotes within a quote. Double quotation marks are used for the first quotation. Single quotation marks are used for a quotation within a quotation. So, John shouted at Steve, you're doing it all wrong. Notice, my whole quote has double quotation marks around it. The thing John is shouting at Steve, so the quote from John, has single quotation marks around it. Okay? And just for clarity, it's nice to kind of put a space between them so I can see where my single ones end. The governor has prior obligations and said he wishes he could be in attendance today. All right, again, oops, forgot my final quotes. You can add those on there. Again, I got double quotation marks around the whole thing, single quotation marks around the governor's quote. Okay? The weatherman said, this weekend should be filled with blue skies. Again, double quotation marks around the whole thing, single quotation marks around the quote within a quote. This next one, this is a fun, tricky one. Joan emphatically said, we won't sing God Save the Queen. So I have my whole quote, double quotation marks around it. I have my quote from Joan, single quotation marks. I then have the title of the song. So I go back to double. So you go double, single, double. And then I guess if there was another layer, you would do single again, but I don't know why you would need that many quotes within a quote within a quote within a quote. Okay? But if you do, you go double, single, double, single. All right, skipping words. Use ellipsis points to show where you've skipped words within a quotation. You don't always want to use the whole quote. Sometimes they're really long. When I say ellipsis, that just means 3 dots. Okay? Omit any punctuation on either side of the ellipsis unless you need the punctuation there in order to have it make sense. So here you can see a place where I've skipped part of my quote, okay, and I put dot, dot, dot. All right, and then I have my colon that I would assume was in the original quote, and then whatever came after my colon. Now, if you're skipping into like entire sentence or more, use 4 dots instead of 3. All right, so you can see that here. I have 4 dots right here. That just tells the reader I skipped a really big chunk of the quote. Okay. All right, so include your page number immediately following your last quote. You won't always have a page number, but when we're doing response literature, you will. But before the end punctuation, page numbers should be in parentheses. You don't need to say page. So Stargirl said, Cinnamon has found something yummy in your ear. Cinnamon's a rat. I don't know if that makes the quote any better. And then I put parentheses around my page number before my period. All right, last one, titles. So we're going to italicize titles. Italicize means slanted like that. Titles of books, plays, newspapers, movies, and TV shows, operas, and other long pieces of literature art. Note when you're handwriting, kind of hard to write in italics, so you can just underline it. Use quotation marks, this is how this all fits in. Use quotation marks for the titles of short stories, poems, articles, songs, fairy tales, and other shorter works. All right, so that was your very fast review of some punctuation. We're going to do more tomorrow. We actually have a little bit more to talk about with quotes. There's a lot of stuff with quotes. And then we'll do hyphens, dashes, parentheses, all that other stuff. Okay?